It's 5 o'clock. We'll get started. We still are waiting for two board members, and if they come online, we'll acknowledge that when they get there. So welcome everyone to today's October Power Board meeting. We've got a little bit of an audience today, and it's fun. It's always fun to have a little audience. So we'll get started with item number one, the approval of the agenda. Did everyone get a copy of the email and get a chance to look through that? And are there any questions, comments, concerns?
No concerns. Go ahead and approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, Todd made the first and Dick made the second. Dick, would you start us on a vote?
Saunders, aye.
Todd?
Spriggs, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, item number two, the approval of the minutes. Again, did you get a chance to look through? Are there any questions, comments on those?
Oh, look good to me. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from September 2nd.
And I'll second.
Dick did the first, Todd did Dick did the first, Todd did the second. So Todd, would you start us on a vote?
Spriggs, aye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay. New items of business. The recommendation to the City Council to approve the resolution authorizing Fremont Solar. Rick, we'll turn the time to you.
You're not going to read the
Mark is on.
thing?
Okay.
This is, I guess, kind of, do I need to reshare, Dave?
No, let me swap you over. I just need to let you know when you're ready to do it. Here you go.
Okay, cool. Last month, we had talked about the Fremont Solar project with batteries. There were some questions on how it would fit into our resource portfolio, and I think, the basic project hasn't changed from what was presented. It's all the documents that I sent out, the only difference was they'd filled in a couple of the dates that were known now that weren't last month. So Scott and Jake put their thinking caps on and come up with, I think, a really good presentation. So I'll turn the time over to Scott and let him walk through that. With AI too,
Ooh.
All right, we just took some time and put some visuals together to kind of help illustrate a little bit what we're dealing with. So this presentation, kind of starting with this picture, is this what we want to, really Rick came up with this concept of trying to put a square peg in a round hole. We'll talk about that, but so this is kind of representing the products that are out there that we can get, different kinds of resources, whether they're wind, hydro, solar, coal, whatever it be. There's different kinds, different shapes. They all have different patterns that we can get them in. And of course, they all have different price tags too. We didn't illustrate that here necessarily, but they all have their different price tags. So the concept or the hard thing is that what we were trying to do is that our load would represent the hole that you see in the table there. Our load is flowing and it's always rising and falling. And the products that we can purchase to fill in that hole are set. They're square and triangle and some curves in there. Usually the curves are a lot more expensive, but you're trying to fill in this hole with these products that don't fit perfectly. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, and kind of that same concept here with this illustration of trying to drive a square peg into a round hole. And really, this one really does demonstrate well, because it's kind of really what happens is you have to use what you can get your hands on, and you're usually going to have some leftovers. You can see the chips that are laying around there. You're going to have some leftover resource. So we wanted to show you, give you an example of our curves. So we took this idea of showing you one day out of each month of the year. So this is one day out of the month of November of last year, November 2024. And for this graph, we used the highest month of, or the highest day of each month. So the day in November that had the highest peak, that's the graph that you see there. And if we have those blocks that we're trying to fit into this curve, it's not too bad here. I mean, you got a difference of 3 or 4 megawatts, 5 megawatts there, but not a super curvy curve there. I mean, it's not terrible, but as we go throughout the year, we'll look at December. Now we overlay December over that one. Those two colors are a little close together. Sorry about that, but you can see there's a little more of a double peak there on December. January, still got that double peak, but it's getting a little bit higher in the afternoon. So those numbers at the bottom, 1 through 24, those are the hours of the day. February kind of flattens out a little bit in the middle of the day. Oops, I hit 2 buttons there. March, April, starting to get that afternoon peak in April. May, you can see a big change. You know, it's real low in the morning hours and real high in the afternoon hours. June, even higher. July is higher. August. Then we go to September of 24 and October. So that's a full year's worth of curves. And those are just one day out of each of those months. But we wanted to overlay them and just kind of show you the difference. Did somebody say something? We wanted to show you the curves that we're trying to fit these products into. Then we created this curve, and I apologize, it's hard to see those. It's basically the same curves that we just looked at, but strung together throughout the year. So a year's worth, and you can see that in the summer months, those peaks get really high, and in the winter months, they kind of flatten out and are a little bit more manageable. But even at that, again, this is just looking at one day out of each of those months. And if you were trying to buy product, trying to flatten out that curve or trying to fit something in there, this is sorry, I went the wrong way. This is a trend line. You know, even the trend line isn't flat. It's still lower in the winter and higher in the summer. Using the same graph, so the pink that we were just looking at, that's the highest day of each month. The green is the lowest day of each month. And then the orange is an average. And you can kind of see in the background, or I think if I go one more, you can see all three together there. So you can see the difference that we deal with just within 1 month. You can have, you know, several megawatts worth of difference throughout 1 month. This chart here, the top is just showing that same chart we just looked at with trend lines. But I also kind of wanted to show you how just 1 month, so the orange graph at the bottom, that's October of last year. And that is all 31 days, and each hour of that day is represented there. So you can see at the beginning, it's rising really high peaks. The beginning of October, higher temperatures. And then as we go towards the end of the month, it starts to flatten out. But that's just October. So can you see my mouse? Yeah. So that whole orange graph would fit between these two markers here, October and November. So you can imagine with all 12 months, there's a lot of up and down that happens with our load. And we're trying to purchase resource to fit within that. We wanted to represent that. We wanted to show you that. To kind of give you a base understanding of what we're dealing with when we're trying to get resource to cover our load. A little bit more education. This is a graph that was put together by one of the members or one of the staff at UAMPS. So we're talking about Fremont Solar is what this agenda item is. And this is a graph that would represent the most likely profile of that product, of the Fremont Solar. So what you're looking at, the red is the solar that would come to UAMPS from Fremont. The green is the solar that's going to go to the battery to charge the battery. So this Fremont project has batteries with it. So those hours of 5 through 16 or 17 that show green, actually barely see a little bit on 18, is when the solar energy is charging the batteries. Then he brings in this orange curve, which is the battery to UAMPS. So the red is what UAMPS is receiving from the solar energy. The green is the solar to the battery, and then the orange curve is the battery to UAMPS. And then he'll give us one more view here where he's combined the solar and the battery together to show what each of the members would receive from this project is the magenta line. So you can see that by charging the batteries, earlier in the day, 6 through 14, or, is when they're charging it real heavy, they can now discharge those batteries where the orange curve is to shift the energy to the later hours of the day. If you remember the charts from earlier, let me see if I can flip back quickly. Maybe this one would help find. You can see that our peak is generally right there, 18, 19, 18 is the most common peak, but 18, 19 are the hours of the day that we're peaking generally with our load. And this battery allows us to shift from that blue curve to the magenta curve. So it shifts the energy farther over to those hours that we need it. This is a chart that Jake prepared that has, it's a typical stack of our resources that we currently own. There's a lot of data there, and you don't necessarily have to understand all of it. Each stack, each color is a different resource that we have within our portfolio. The ones that I kind of want to point out are this cream color right in here, and this orange and yellow are, you can see down below, Steel 1B, Steel 1A, Red Mesa. Those are our solar products that we have now. So we're kind of questioning, okay, should we get this Fremont product because it's more solar? And these graphs that Jake prepared, this one is, first we're going to look at February. So you can, if you remember, February was lower loads. You can see off to the left, 16, 14 to 18 megawatts is what our loads are. I guess what we could look at is probably the load forecast, the magenta line. The red line is the high hour, and the blue line is the low hour. The magenta is the load forecast, what we're forecasting to have. So kind of keeping in mind this solar that we have in the middle of the chart here, if we purchase Fremont product, this is what it would look like without the battery. You can see that it lowered the blue, which is the NEBO. It lowered how much NEBO we're taking, but it brings in this solar power that'll be a lot cheaper. But it also gives us extra excess in February. It looks like we're going to be long on solar. But if we add in the battery, now we can shift that peak. So you can see that peak shifts to the right to those more important hours. And something to keep in mind in all of this is that generally speaking, those hours, 14 through 2021 are going to be a lot more expensive products to buy, because that's the peaks that most of the country is peaking on those days. Or at least in our region, I should say. In our region, those prices are going to be a lot higher. That gives you an idea on February what that does. We're going to also, Jake prepared a couple of slides here for July. You can remember the July peak, or the July profile is a lot different than February. So now we're dealing up there in the 50 to 55 megawatt range. This is what it would look like without Fremont. We got the most expensive time of the day is, we got a short fall there. This is what it would look like if we just did solar, the Fremont solar. It does help us through a lot of those hours. We're a little long in the early hours, but then if we add in the battery, it's pretty helpful to shift that peak over to the peak hours of the day. I think that's all of the charts that we wanted to show you. I'll probably, do you want me to?
Scott,
Yeah,
this is based on usage though, right? Well, last year's usage though, right?
I think he's going off last year's usage, and the magenta line would be the forecast for next year. I think that's what he had going on. Yeah, and that's something to think about. This project will be 25-year project, and this is going off current numbers. So we know that load is gonna rise. We're gonna need product to fill in the growth also.
Stay pretty close between 23 and 24.
24 and 25, yeah.
Jump in.
24.
Let me look here real fast.
Yeah, 24 was a really hot year, hot summer, so loads were really high, and then this last summer was a little more calmer.
Yeah, so 24, if we look at July, we actually went up about, 2 megawatts, 2.5? 23 to 24. This year, we're actually down about 1.5 megawatts. And this is the monthly peak, so that's just those monthly. So again, we're highly dependent on weather. This year, we didn't have any really 110, 111, 112 days. I would bet this would be 3 or 4 megawatts higher had we experienced one of those stretches. So that's the other challenge, and you can see in all the graphs, it's highly, highly temperature dependent. So
It's interesting that weather affects it more than usage than growth. If we're actually a little bit lower
right,
this year with the growth that we've had over a year, the
Exactly.
difference that the temperature could make, it's interesting.
right. This was quite a few years ago when I worked at St. George. Even back then, we were able to see the load coming into the county, and 1 degree would mean 10 megawatts of load to the county. You could watch it, and now I'm sure it's more than that, so. So hopefully that answers. I know Dick had some concerns. It was a very good exercise for us to go back and rethink, because this project was quasi put on a shelf for a little while. Then it came back, so it was good to do a little more detail of how it fits. As you can see, it's not a perfect fit, never will be. However, I think the general consensus amongst most people going into EDAM in the future, we're gonna be better off being, I'd rather be a little bit long than a little bit short. I think it stabilizes our overall costs, particularly when the market does crazy things. If we've got enough resource, most all of ours have at least a good fixed component to it. Nebo has pre-bought gas. All the PPAs have fixed costs, or, not variable costs based on market, so.
So what is the difference in price between Nebo and this? I think you mentioned this is,
It depends on, to be honest, Nebo during the summer is running around $70. In the winter, it will be higher because we're not using as much. So it'd probably go up in the 80s, 90s, and this product blended is in the low 70s. So it's right in there with our other resources that we have and expect. The pretty Magenta Resources here, that product is 80 that we got for our 5-year product going forward. So it's priced well. The other thing about this project, it has its transmission interconnection agreement and is the probability of it getting completed is much higher than some of the unknowns, even on the natural gas projects. I think they're gonna get built, but I think the timing could shift depending on different market forces and stuff. And this would come in 27, is that right? December of 27, early 28. So we still got a couple more years of growth to fit this, so everything kind of moves up.
So this is a flat, the 70 some odd dollar, right? Or are we paying during the solar prices different from when the battery price kicks in? That was one question I had.
Yes, it is different. If you look at the, well, let me see if I can go back and just find it here. I think it's in this one. So the solar energy is 3545 megawatt hour. So that's flat over the 25-year period. Then the batteries are done a little different. They're not done based on energy. They call it kilowatt month. And so we have 7.5 megawatts. So if you take 7,500 times 1350, that's what we're going to pay a month to have the battery. But the battery, you'll notice, has a 1350. There's an escalation clause. Oh, let me look at the, okay, here you go. So the battery component does have an escalation clause that's tied to tariffs.
That's
And
capped
so-
at 1414.
Yeah, so that could vary from 1350 to 1414. And that's where the blended cost, you mush all that together, you dispatch it like was shown, it ends up between 69 and 74, depending on what the tariffs end up doing to the battery. That make sense? So yes, it's fixed with that one exception of, and then once the batteries are put in, obviously, that'll become known what that is in between those. So. And that's what it refers to here. Once it's done, then there's no escalation on that. So that's kind of where we're at. Again, it's not a perfect fit. I don't think anything we have is going to be a perfect fit. You think of our generators out at our plant. There's a lot of money sitting there 8 months of the year that they don't run. Not an exact same parallel, but it's not uncommon to, because of that load shape. If we had a load that just came up and was flat, that would be the ideal load to have. And we just don't have that unless we get some really large base loads that are there 24/7. I don't see that that's going to change dramatically for our system because it's highly air conditioner driven. And then the morning peak, you can see the heating peak over the winter. So
It'd be a lot easier in Costa Rica.
yeah, where it's same temperature year round, and yeah, you'd have much more predictable loads than we do have. And like I say, a few degrees in the summer is huge different. And then you have the variable market pricing going on at the same time, and so it gets kind of fun to do all that, so. Did we answer your questions, Dick? And hopefully it helped, Mark or Andy on the, you said they were on? Oh, okay, Mark's on.
Yeah, I really didn't have a issue with the fact that it's a good idea to have battery backup.
Uh,
I was just concerned about the fact that of all the things that we're getting another solar source, but this one does give us more flexibility.
Exactly.
It would be nice if it was cheaper, but it is what it is.
Yeah, our other solar without battery, blended with transmission, are in the mid to upper 40s is what we're seeing, so. So the solar part of this is actually, and these prices would be without transmission, so. And that's about 975 a megawatt hour, so. So the project, again, we've signed up for 7.5 megawatts currently, and that's what was depicted in the graphs.
So Rick, I'm good here too. I think you answered all my questions. My concern was more the longevity of it, the 25-year contract on it. And it just looks like we don't have a lot of other choices. So this would be the way to go. But thank you guys for your work. It did make it a lot more clear on the impact that solar will have on the overall load. So thank you guys for that work.
Okay, appreciate it. And then going back to looking forward, the natural gas projects are roughly 2030, 2031, somewhere around there. And so this purple, that's our current 5-year. We lost the screen there, Dave. It got shut off, I think, completely. Might have done. See if we can get it back. Anyway, that same dark purple that, so this is that most recent 5-year contract. And when the natural gas come in, one will have additional load growth, and then this product won't be there. And so that's where the natural gas will fit into the future. So. Because this will take us, I believe it's to 2030 or 29 or 30. I'd have to remember exactly, but I think it's 2030. So.
Provisions in this contract, if their batteries start needing a replacement and they incur extra cost, we're still tied into our contractual price.
It's the same cost, yeah. There's performance requirements in the contract as well. Any other questions for me or Scott? I think you've seen the basic project, but this was to help you see how it fits a little better. And it helped us too.
Saw that, at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, we're still consuming a lot of power in the summertime.
Exactly. And I mean, to be candid, I wish our other solar had battery as well.
Yeah, well, it would have been good.
And there's opportunities that can be done again, but it comes with a cost as well. So it's trying to balance out.
Yeah, it certainly fills a need. You hate to see on those graphs any gap between what's being used and what we have available.
Well, you can.
When you see that graph and how it takes up that gap, that's reassuring.
And think back to, I think we entered into this current 5-year probably less than a year ago. So we would have been short from here all the way up to there without that. So
Yeah,
and that's where, you remember 22, 23, where we just got hammered. That's because we didn't have anything secured in our hands at the time.
even
we
if
were
you're
on the
paying
market.
a little bit more, it's always nice to know what you're going to be paying.
Exactly.
Then you can plan accordingly. It's the surprises that you don't like.
And then our market exposure becomes much more manageable instead of, it might be 5, 6 megawatts instead of 20
Yeah.
or 30, something like that. So, yeah, those hours could still be painful, but it's not going to be as dramatic as we've had in the past. So I think we've worked hard to try to match the load with resources to minimize that, so.
Thank you, Rick and Scott. Are there any other questions? We do have Mark online. He joined us at the first of it.
I don't think I do.
No questions here.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to recommend to the city council to approve a resolution authorizing the Fremont Solar PPA project transaction schedule under the master firm power supply agreement with UAMPS Power Systems
I'll
and
second.
matters.
I'll second that.
Okay, Todd did the first, Mark did the second. Dick, would you start us on a vote?
Saunders, aye.
Mark,
Hauser, aye.
Todd,
Spriggs, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Scott. And did you say Jake was the other one that worked on that? Yeah, thank you.
That was
Thank them
helpful.
both for us. And next item of business, item number 4 is regular business, the operations and generation.
And that resolution will go to council on the 22nd, so just so you're aware. So I'll just go through and do kind of our general reports on things going on. One of the things the crews do at least annually is a bucket truck rescue training exercise. And so this is just a few pictures of them doing that. So they get the trucks out, and this is for, say they're up in the truck for whatever reason and something happens that you can't get out, or the bucket fails, or there's a problem and you need to get somebody out. So they have, more or less, it's a repelling system that
Did you volunteer for that?
they've that they can repel down. And I think they like the training, actually, to tell you the truth, but
I was gonna say if we can volunteer.
so, but it is weird in a bucket with nothing around you, and I'm sure that first little bit's a bit, I've repelled off of mountains and cliffs or whatever, but having nothing around you at all would be a little different experience. So again, part of safety training, keeping that at the forefront with everybody. So our September peak was a little over 47 megawatts, which was about 3 megawatts lower than the 2022 peak. And that's when we had that crazy hot first week in September in 2022. So not unexpected to be lower than that peak because of that real unusual. The generator, our gen plant, we ran through the end of September with our pre-purchased gas. Now they'll kind of keep an eye on the market and need and run kind of on an as-needed basis. One of the units is down right now doing a little bit of repair on some of the controls. So we'll keep an eye on that. Right now, market prices have been pretty favorable, so there really hasn't been a need to run them and put hours on them. Grapevine substation continues to progress. Again, exciting pictures of conduits and trenches, but that's where we're at on the project. Hopefully it gives you an idea. There's a ton of conduit and things that when the project's done, you don't see all this work that went in to put everything underground. And those are the main feeder circuits would be in these larger conduits. And eventually there'll be the common green switches that sit on top of these basements. And these are some of the smaller control, lighting, those kind of conduits. And then they all come into a cable tray system. So you see the conduits coming up here. And then that leads into, there's a trough in here that comes into the control building, which will go into the relay panels, the AC and DC power panels. And these tray systems make it really nice that when you have to do an addition, you don't have to go all the way back to the control panel or the control building. You just get over to this tray and then you have a path already set up for you. So that's kind of where we're at on that. They've got just a little bit of conduit work left, and then they were starting some of the trenching on the ground grid. And once they get that done, they'll recompact the whole site and then put the gravel in. And then that contract would be up at that point, and then our crews will start standing steel and doing other work in the substation. So, on the transmission line that goes with this, October 20th is an important day. The contractor that's going to do the foundations will be starting their work on October 20th, as well as we're going to be receiving 7 truckloads of poles on that same day. So it'll be a busy site up there. So there's 35 poles, 2 pieces each, so there's 70 pieces of steel arriving on those 7 trucks on that day. So there were 2 foundations and a section of the transmission line that follows I-15 that we're going to hold off on for a little while until we get things finalized with some of the development. They were needing to change the grade significantly in some spots. So we will probably wait until they get that grade changed and then do the work after that. So AMI project, I think we've turned a pretty good corner there. We have right now just under 200 meters deployed. And we've got a fairly decent amount scheduled to be changed out on the 14th next week, and then about 100 on the 16th. And we're going to use that as kind of a gauge of balancing the field work and the office work. It takes probably 3, 4, 5 minutes a meter for Rachel or Brittany or someone to put the data in. So you start multiplying that out, it actually chews up quite a bit of time if you're changing out, 100 meters, that's 400 or 500 minutes, and you can do the math. It'll take pretty much a day to get that done. So we're trying to balance that, and then I think we're probably going to schedule 2 or 3 days a month that we're just going to focus on meter changeouts in order to get it done, and then the crews can schedule around that. We're also, say we have a planned outage somewhere, so since they're already out, we're changing the meters when they're doing planned outages, or sometimes the read and rolls, those kind of things that will take advantage of. If they're already out, we're not adding a second outage. So
How are we getting the word out to the public? Notifying those?
The city has a texting and email system. Brittany indicated that between the two, they should be able to hit at least 95% of the people, and would send that out a couple days in advance saying within the next 2 or 3 days, you're gonna have a short outage. If things go well, if your meter base is in good condition, it should be 2-3 minutes at the most. It shouldn't take very long.
I mean, information on the AMI
Oh,
and how people could use it and benefits of it and that sort
at
of
this,
thing.
at this point, I haven't done a ton on that until we get the web portal set up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we've talked to the vendor. They would like us to wait until we have about 2,000 meters deployed before we go down that path. So that's the plan. So I'm hoping maybe 6 months-ish, kind of, that we'd be at that level to where we can get that app and I think see where things are at. So that's kind of that project. And then we talked last month that we're in the middle of the shift period from readings on the 20th to the 1st. We did delay the last read a couple days, and then this read we'll do, I think, on the 31st of October. Pardon? As a kind of a backup. So what that did is it shortened that extra period and spread it out over kind of 3 periods. So it shouldn't be quite as big an impact. But going forward, the target will basically be on the 1st. The Aclara is very easy because we can grab the file it generates on the 1st. The difference on the Itron, if it falls on a Saturday or Sunday, it'll either be the Friday or Monday after that. So kind of like what we've been doing right now. So you may have noticed that Public Works is putting a new semaphore on 500 West Telegraph. And so our crews have been in there. We're doing some improvements in there, changing out some poles to support that project, as well as setting us up for a heavier feeder tie in the future as the apartments to the north get built. We'll be able to establish a tie. So we took that opportunity to kind of combine 2 needs into one project. So that was good. Solar applications, we had 4 in September. I'm kind of nervously awaiting the onslaught that might hit in November because I know there's some ads out there saying you got to have it in before the end of December to get the tax credit. So I suspect at some point that we might see a little blip in there. But so far, or some wood, knock on wood, that it hasn't happened quite yet. On the pole attachment policy, Scott's been a great help, and we actually have a meeting tomorrow with our consultant, UFS, go over the last few items, and then we'll finalize it and basically send it to them and say, this is what the document is, please sign. And then we can go over these charts just a little bit that I've tried to show each month lately. So our wholesale power cost for August was 8.3 cents. As you can see, it's the bright green, and so it sits kind of right in the middle of all the averages through here. And certainly not up in these crazy price times. Which translates that the PCA remains roughly 1.5 cents in the negative. So you should be seeing a credit on your bill for that. And I suspect, based on the wholesale power costs, that we'll stay pretty close to that for at least the foreseeable future. Again, we'd already kind of look at our peak. Our August peak was about 1 megawatt less, and July about 1.5 less than last year. However, our September average usage for residential was up just a little bit from previous couple of years, but less than a lot of the ones before. So it's just interesting to kind of track that a bit. So that's kind of the local side of things. Once the transmission poles get here, as crews are able to work it into their schedule, we'll start seeing some poles go up along the parkway. It's not going to be, you know, a total focus. So as they have a day or two, they'll work that in. And so it'll be a little bit of a slower process than if we brought in a contractor to do it and just focus on it. So, but it's going to save money and our customers money in the long run to do that. So fortunately, we don't have a super hard deadline when we've got to get that sub up and going. So we're able to use our crews. And the crews are excited to do both projects. So. Any other questions on that? Outage-wise, we've done pretty good the last little while. Nothing too unusual. You always have some here and there, but nothing big, which is our goal. Moving on to the UAMPS side of things. Our September meetings were just held online, so it was a limited number. I think we just had 5 PMC meetings. And we'll kind of go through some of those. I've already talked about the Fremont and this approval process for Fremont's going on with, I think there's 25 or so participants in that. And the goal is to have them all done by the end of October. On the Central St. George project, just a couple things on that. I think I reported last month that the overall 138 kV system looping between all the utilities in the county, the physical side's basically done, but we're waiting for one approval from FERC on an intertime meter point. That was submitted in August, and it can take up to 90 days. So hopefully within the next month, we'll get that approval and can move forward with actually closing that loop. The design work for the transformer capacity addition is started. They're initially focusing on the specs for the transformers since they're long lead time items. The only other item on that project to note is did some testing on one of the transformers up at Central, found a bad bushing, and so it was taken offline. So right now we're running on 2 of the 3, which is fine, and they're supposed to do that repair work tomorrow, and so hopefully by the end of the week all 3 will be back online again. So probably the biggest thing on the UAMP side was on the NEBO project. It was in mid-September, they had the steam turbine trip, I guess September 8th, early September. And then they took it off for a period, did some bore scope inspections, couldn't see anything on what they could see with the bore scope, tried starting it again and couldn't get it to come up to capacity, so they shut it off, had to do a much deeper dive into the unit. And this is a slide deck that UAMPS presented at the PMC meeting. And this section in here, they aren't able to see with a bore scope. Basically just a camera on a flexible thing. So they didn't see any damage where they were able to see, but this is part of the steam turbine. This stage of the turbine should have fins on it. So obviously, that's not a good thing. This is a close-up of these separations. And you don't have to be a steam turbine aficionado to tell all these pieces laying in the bottom is not a good thing. So it was a significant damage to the machine. And then these are some of the stages down from that one that failed. Obviously, there was a lot of debris that was going through and further damaging those. They found significant bearing wear. And so that's the whole steam turbine. And that section that failed was right in here. So at this point in time, it was shipped off to Texas. We don't have a lot of information as far as costs and timing to get that back in service. This was the latest picture they just sent today. This is the unit in Texas that now they've blasted it and have started doing all the various testing to determine extent of damage, what it's going to cost to repair, timing, and all that. So in the meantime, so there's the two turbines. The one's the combustion, that's natural gas, and then it goes through the heat recovery system, which runs the steam turbine. So right now they call it simple cycle. So basically they cut off the exhaust right after the combustion turbine, and so they're running basically at half power. We have one of the two generators online right now. So good news is it's right now pricing's good, and we're not during the peak time of the year, but we don't know what this is gonna entail. So
That might take a while to get it back installed.
my personal gut feeling, if we get it back and going within 6 months, it'll be really good. So, I mean, it's a pretty significant repair, so. And it's not gonna be cheap either, so. But there are funds, they've turned it into the insurance. The insurance has commented they'd never seen one do this. Not a whole lot of comfort, but, so, more to come on that. Kind of a cousin to it is Veo. There hasn't been any change. I think that turbine's supposed to be, or generator is the component that had the problem there. I think that's supposed to be back online hopefully next month, so. See the natural gas projects. Millard, there hasn't been a ton of change on that one. They're starting through some of the public processes on both of the natural gas projects. The transmission interconnection's been submitted on both projects, and an owner's engineer has been selected on both, so they're starting to work on at least preliminary specs and some general layouts on Millard. Some of the initial feedback on the GSUs, the generator step-up transformers, they can take up to 4 years to get. So that could be the critical path component that is taking that long. So if you were to place an order today, you won't see it for 4 years. So interesting times to try to balance everything. The EDAM, the extended day ahead market, Pacific Corp got their approval from FERC, and so it will go into effect on I think it's May 1st of 2026. And Pacific Corp is working on the business practices, which is basically the guidelines of how they're gonna bill and how do you reconcile things and those kind of items. UAMPS is working with PacifiCorp, making comments and those kind of things. So it's coming. There's working hard. We're trying to do our best to understand it, all the nuances, but there's a lot to take in there. As the ones that were able to attend the conference could see that as well. On the all power requirements project, there's really no change to report from what we presented last month. The next step, I believe they'll have an actual document, a kind of a draft to send out that we could redline, comment, evaluate in a little more detail. So I don't have any significant additional information to provide on that at this point. And last but not least, the CFPP closeout was making good progress. They're not 100% sure what the shutdown will do to that progress. The various payments between UAMPS, NuScale, and the Department of Energy were all scheduled to take place in October. Last I heard, they were still on track to do that. So, but they are keeping a close eye on what that shutdown may or may not do to it. Hopefully it won't have significant impacts. They get those agreements done and the transactions done. There'll be a few minor things that still have to be done, but that'll be the biggest one with the biggest financial impact. So, and that's my UAMPS report too. So, any questions? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Are there any other comments, questions, concerns?
And next month, because it would be normally on election day, we don't have one and it's scheduled for November. The only thing, right, that's what I said. The only thing that could potentially change that is if something were to come up with the all requirements that would require a vote before December. Then we'd just pick a time that works and try to schedule a meeting, but I don't anticipate that being the case right now.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, if there's nothing else, does anybody have a motion to adjourn?
I'll go ahead and motion to adjourn.
I'll second
No,
it.
Todd did the first, Dick got you on the second. So Mark, do you want to start us on a vote?
Hauser, aye.
Dick? Todd?
Spriggs, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you everyone for attending and we'll see you in December.